Hi everyone! Today I'm going to do a series review of the Graceling realm books by Kristen Cashore, which are right here behind me. Graceling, Fire, and Bitterblue. The Graceling realm books are young adult fantasy, and I absolutely fell in love with the first one last summer and finally got around to reading the other two and wanted to share my thoughts with you. For those of you that have not read them, I'll do a quick non-spoilery overview of each one, just so you have a basic idea of what they're all about, and if they sound interesting you can go check them out yourself. I'd personally recommend them to anybody who likes YA and anybody who likes fantasy. First, let's start off with Graceling, Kristen Cashore's first ever published novel as far as I know. This world is set in a sort of medievalish times, and there are 7 kingdoms. And the person we follow is the niece of one of these kings, the king of the Midlands, named Katza. Now Katza is graced. She is a Graceling. And what that means is that there are a number of children in the world who are born with 2 different colored eyes. And what that indicates is that you have some sort of really specialized skill. It could be anything from cooking to being an amazing juggler. You never know if it's going to be ridiculously useful or just completely random. Katza's is a little bit sinister. She is a natural-born killer. In her kingdom, and in many of these kingdoms, if you're discovered to be graced, then the king will take you from your family and you will be basically a tool for him. Like, you are under his employment now. And so Katza spends the book trying to figure out who she really is and what it means to have this grace and if she can do any good with it and if she can potentially ever get some freedom from being just somebody else's tool. I really loved this book. I gave it a 4 stars on Goodreads and I would have given it a 4.5 if I could have. I love Katza. I love the relationships between her and the other characters. I thought they were pretty organic and real, and I think Katza is such a funny, stubborn character, and I like her growth throughout the book and how she learns to not be afraid of her own power. I like that the world wasn't overwhelming. You kind of learn as you go along as Katza moves around, and there isn't a ton of info dumping. And yeah, I just thought it was a really interesting concept, and I thought it was really well written. So yeah, just overall really loved this book. Now let's move on to Fire. Even though Fire was the second book that Kristen Cashore wrote, the events in this book take place before the events of Graceling. It's sort of a prequel, but it's a little bit different because even though it takes place in the same universe as Graceling, it's in a different kingdom entirely that does not know about the 7 kingdoms. The 7 kingdoms are over here, there's this giant uninhabitable mountain range, and then on the other side there are the Dells, a kingdom that Fire lives in, our main character. And the gimmick of this world is that they don't have Gracelings, but they have monsters. Monsters are just really colorful counterparts of normal creatures. So Fire is a human monster. She has ridiculously amazing multicolored red hair that looks like fire. Anything that is a monster has the ability to manipulate the minds of non-monsters. And so Fire is coming to terms with the fact that she is the only human monster left in this world, and she really hates that she can so easily manipulate people. Her father was a total monster in more ways than one. He was an evil man and just a twisted person. And Fire's coming to deal with his legacy and fit in the world without doing harm to the people she cares about, and she doesn't want to be seen as this terror. And so this story follows her, and it's really interesting. I gave this one a 3 on Goodreads only because I just had a hard time empathizing with her at first and really getting into the world. So that's the only reason I gave it a 3. The second half of the book, I really got into it. I started to become more comfortable in this new part of the world, and I really overall enjoyed it. Thirdly, there is Bitterblue. Bitterblue is sort of a sequel to Graceling. It takes place 8 years or 9 years after the events in Graceling, and you do see some of your favorite characters again, but you don't follow Katza this time. This time you follow Bitterblue. I'm not going to reveal too much about who she is because it's sort of a Graceling spoiler, but basically she's someone who's very politically important in one of the kingdoms, and her father is one of the villains in Graceling that appears sort of later in the book. There's this terrible manipulative grace that Bitterblue's father had. She's trying to help her kingdom recover from that, and she has about 1,000,002 mysteries to unravel about what really happened when her father was doing all the damage that he was doing, and she's trying to heal her kingdom and find her place in it. I really like Bitterblue as a character because she's different from Katza and Fire in that she doesn't have any supernatural sort of power. She's just has a lot of political power. She's a very important person and she gets her power from that. It's a big one compared to the other two, but I didn't find it particularly slow. Some people did, but I got really caught up in all of the puzzles and the mystery, and I just absolutely loved everything about this book. I don't want to go too much into it because I don't want to spoil anything, but I gave this book a 5 on Goodreads, and I loved it. So the last non-spoilery bit I'm going to say just talks about some general thoughts that I liked about the series. I think, like I mentioned before, I really enjoyed the writing style. It's sort of poetic-ish, it's sort of medieval-ish, but it's still really funny, and it's not like so Shakespearean or anything that's hard to follow. It's pretty. I like it. Another thing was, I think I already talked about the world building. In Graceling you get the foundation, and in Fire you get the other foundation, so that the world sort of comes together in the two halves, and then in Bitterblue everything sort of just comes together and you get a more in-depth view of everything, so you really feel comfortable and at home in this world by the time you are done with Bitterblue. So I thought that was really well done. I also liked the way that the relationships and the plot, like the love story and the regular plot, are well balanced and integrated. None of them really overwhelm the other for long, and I thought that the relationships were pretty honest, and I really liked the organic way that they developed. And then one of the biggest surprises for me, and the most pleasant surprises, is the way that Kristen Cashore deals with gay and lesbian relationships in her stories. First of all, they exist, so that's already a plus, like, for me. I love that. But the way that she approaches it is different because instead of putting in a token gay character and having their sexuality be like the thing that you know about them and one of their most defining features, these characters, you already kind of get just to know them as just humans, and then, by the way, they're gay. And I really like that. They're not defined by who they love. It's just a facet of who they are, and it's just one more reason to love them in an already big list. And I just really thought that was refreshing. I thought it was really a more humanistic approach to having gay characters. I was glad that they weren't, you know, one-dimensional. The fourth thing I really liked was that there are a variety of female characters. Most of them tend to be sort of strong, but they're strong in different ways. Like, Katz is really stubborn and she's got her physical strength, whereas Fire has just an iron-hard will that she comes to develop, and Bitterblue is a really very sympathetic and empathetic, and she just has so much love to give. So they all have strength from different places, and some of the other female characters, like Helda, who takes care of Katza in Graceling, or at least she tries. She's more of like the mothery type, but like she's still like a very respected woman. Like, I'm sick of only having like one female protagonist and there's like no other women. I was glad that there were a lot of other women that these characters could draw from and be close to, and I just really enjoyed that there was a lot of good, well-written female characters besides just the protagonists. That was great. Alright, so that's it for the non-spoilery part. I'm gonna move on to just a little bit of spoilery bits. This is probably already getting kind of long, but just going into a little bit more. So if you have not read the books and you don't want to be spoiled, go away. Leave. Leave and come back after you've read them all. Okay, bye non-spoilery people. Bye. Bye. Okay, alright, spoilery bits. So let's talk about characters. I think I connected to Bitterblue the most, actually, which is kind of funny because to me she kind of came off as a lot younger than she actually supposed to be, just because of the way that some of the other characters treat her. But there was so much of like what she's discovering, like her first love with Saf, and just like learning what it means to be an adult, just let alone a queen. There were so many quirky side characters that I love. Like, I loved Raffen. I loved him even more when him and Ban were revealed to be the most adorable gay couple on the history of the universe. Like, they're so cute and I love them. I really disliked Gideon in the first book. And then in Bitterblue, he just totally turned himself around, and I really loved his character development. All the side characters, even the most like insignificant ones, felt kind of real. They all had enough of a tiny backstory and a purpose that like the whole world felt alive. I really enjoyed that. I really loved the love interests in this book as well. Each of the love interests had their own like fleshed out background. They are their own characters that you just really love as themselves, like in general, on their own. I like too that there's sort of, in Graceling you see two potential love interests in Fire as well. One of them is this like, is Gideon for Katza, and he's like obsessed with her unhealthily. Whereas it shows Poe, who actually has a deep respect for Katza that Gideon doesn't have. And it just kind of shows you the difference between like a more healthy relationship based on mutual respect and eventually trust once Katza gets over the whole Poe's grace versus the other one. And also, I like the non-traditional take that Katza uses. She doesn't want to be owned. I like that she can still find love and still find someone who's going to be there for her without tying herself down. She doesn't have to compromise her beliefs, but she can still find love. And I like Bitterblue and Staff because it's a little bit different than the other two romances. It's a lot more innocent. It was really a very backseat thing. I would have liked maybe a little bit more, but I didn't mind. It would have felt forced, I think, if she put too much more, because Bitterblue has so much else to worry about. She doesn't have a lot of time for romance. At the end, I thought it was realistic. They're like, yeah, they kind of love each other, but they also kind of accept that they might not be right for each other right now, and they part as friends, and we don't know whether or not they're gonna end up together or not. I thought that was kind of realistic. Like, how many people really end up with their very first love, you know? And then the villains. Oh man. In Graceling, Katz is sort of her own villain for a long time, and then later on, as soon as she kind of accepts herself more for who she is, it pretty seamlessly moves on to giving you Lek and how much you hate him, and he just becomes this big deal. And then he continues on being a big deal, even in Bitterblue. Even though he's gone and dead, he's still, his presence is there, and you really hate him, and he's so twisted and really well done, because sometimes you really like just having people you can straight up hate, pretty unambiguously. Lek and Castrol are just screwed up, and that's it. It was very interesting that the most evil thing that they were doing was being manipulative of people. I like that sort of theme of that it can go too far, and with those two it goes too far, but it can also be used for good in other ways, like with Fire and with Poe. So I liked that sort of contrast there. Even though there were a lot of really interesting and thrilling things going on throughout Fire and Graceling, Bitterblue is where I really got super invested. Like, it felt like a sort of case study on this city. And it's funny, it had a very sort of Game of Thronesy feel to me, just because there's so much political drama and like, who can I trust? And there's assassinations everywhere, and like, who is behind it all? What's going on? It kept itself from being predictable because everyone was crazy. So I liked delving into all the mysteries of that, and I loved all the stuff with the ciphers. I thought it was really cool in the back of the book she said she had a linguist basically make up Lek's Delian language. You really felt like you were on this adventure with Bitterblue because you were pretty much just as kind of confused as she was. There was always so much going on. I think some people were saying that you could kind of cut a lot out, but I don't really think you could. I think if you did that, you'd take away from the overall mood and feel of the book, which is chaos and a lot of frustration. Like, every time Bitterblue's waiting around, you just get as frustrated as she is. And I think that that's there purposefully. I think that really helped me to connect so closely with Bitterblue. What I love the most, of course, is that you get your characters from Graceling and you figure out like what's happened to them since the events from the first book and what's going on with the council and all of that. Plus you get a new smattering of characters to love, and then very near the end you get Fire. You hear mention of like Nash and Hannah without actually being named. They talk about how Fire's stepdaughter being the head of the army, I think, the head commander. And that made me so happy because it's like, oh, that's Hannah. So that was cool that you got little mentions of them. I loved that they brought all that in. They say that Nash is like in his 70s, like 76. That means Brigand's only a couple of years younger than that. And that means Fire, I think, is 4 years younger than that. So she is about 70 years old. And just trying to picture her as a 70-year-old woman was really funny. It was also really funny to see Katza without being in her head. Like, it definitely gave you a much different feel, especially because Bitterblue has so much love for her that Katza didn't have for herself for a long time. Like, I loved all the illustrations as well. All the keys at the beginnings of chapters, and the parts of the books that had all these illustrations, and some of the ones at the end, like the bridges, like there's Monster Bridge. There's a lot of extra stuff in Bitterblue that I enjoyed quite a bit. Yeah, there's just a lot to love about these books. I feel like I'm just rambling at this point, so I'm gonna leave it off there. Leave your thoughts below if you've read them, what you loved or didn't love about these books, and what you'd rate them. This has been a review. I'm Jackie, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!